Dr. Viz, what's your reaction to what the Health Secretary just said? He's saying that all of the PPE provision is followed by scientific background and the guidelines that they're offering you as doctors and nurses and care workers is what the scientists say is OK.
Good morning, Ben. Thanks for having me today. And thank you, Mr. Hancock, as well, for that information. But we'd actually like to know why the government hasn't set out its guidelines based on what the WHO is recommending. We would like to know where you're getting this clinical advice from. We'd like to know where this advice is coming from and who is giving you this advice, because the guidelines that we currently have are costing the lives of our healthcare workers, and we can see that it's very obvious because they're dying, and we can see those statistics. So I'd like to know where he's getting this clinical advice from and why our guidelines are not based on what the WHO are recommending.
So when we spoke to Matt Hancock about this, and he was saying that it's based on advice from their scientific and medical advisors, and that's what they go on. But you're not happy with the level of protection that you and your colleagues have. How does it feel when you're in an environment where this is your job day in, day out, to care for people who are, you know, ill, and you don't know whether they've got coronavirus, whether they haven't? Talk to us about the kind of issues on the front line that you're facing because of this.
Well, Charlotte, just like an example, like last year when we were exposed to all of these funky viruses and different viruses, we were told that we had to wear the full protection, our full sleeve aprons, our FFP3 mask, regardless of what the virus was. And when we were with our patients, we had to be fully protected. Now you're telling me that I can wear a plastic apron, a pair of disposable gloves and a surgical mask. How does that make any sense? And what's the difference between last year and this year? A lot of doctors fear for their safety when they go into hospitals because the guidelines are changing on such a quick basis, and they are changing across trusts across the country. And it's not uniform. The guidelines are not uniform across trusts, and the guidelines are, it seems like they're being based on the supply rather than on the science. And this is costing our lives. It's costing us as healthcare workers to become ill. And if we become ill, we cannot take care of our patients, and that's our job. And the job of the government is to protect us, and our job is to protect our patients. And if we cannot do that, then we're going to see an unimaginable situation. And we need to be protected by the government in the right way.
Dr. Viz, a number of our viewers will be saying that we absolutely are incredibly proud of our NHS frontline staff and workers for what they have to do to put themselves in that sort of position. But is now the time to be suing the government? Would it be more effective if you got through the virus and then we get out the other side? What's your answer to anybody who's criticising you for the timing of this?
Well, Ben, if now is not the right time, when will be the right time? Would it be when we see 200 deaths of our healthcare workers? Would it be when we see 300 deaths? The right time was when we saw one death of a healthcare worker. That was when things had to be flagged up.
How much of an additional concern is it for you, because you're pregnant as well, and we all remember the sad news when we had the death of Mary Agua Ayapong, a 28-year-old pregnant nurse, which was just heartbreaking to hear about. And it must be a real worry for you, putting yourself in that position.
Well, absolutely, Charlotte. It was one of the main reasons why I stood up on Sunday, which is why I went to Downing Street and held my silent protest. Because as someone who's pregnant as well, I've been putting myself at risk. I've been putting the life of my unborn child at risk as well. And it goes down to the guidelines again, that they're so inconsistent and they're so obtuse across the country, across different trusts. And it's not very clear how pregnant workers, healthcare workers, should be protected. It seems like they're making things up as they go along, and that's not okay, because we are seeing deaths of women who are pregnant, and they're leaving their children behind. And these children will never know who their mother is, and that's not okay. And this is one of the reasons why I stood out there on Sunday morning with my sign in Downing Street.
You know, what's been the reaction from your colleagues and also for the trust that you work for and your bosses? Because anecdotally, we're hearing there is a lot of pressure on frontline staff to not talk openly about the lack of PPE, to not talk openly about the shifting of the goalposts and the fact that perhaps PPE is only put on when the news cameras turn up. Have you had a bit of a backlash?
All the support I've received, Ben, has been very positive. And what I did on Sunday was my call to all doctors, not just across the country here, but even across the world, that it's okay to speak up. And if you're not happy with the state of political affairs, if you're not happy about how you're protected, you can speak up. And my colleagues have been very supportive. My colleagues are now feeling much more confident to speak up at their workplaces and ask for their protection, which is their basic right.
Had you been put under pressure, though, until you were willing to stand up and say enough is enough, had you been put under pressure from the trusts and from your bosses, not necessarily your colleagues, but from your bosses, to not make a fuss, to not say things publicly on social media or to the press?
We know that doctors across the country are being silenced by their managers right now, and we have been told that my colleagues, nurses and doctors, have been threatened if they do speak up. So this is something that's happening across the country right now, Ben, and this is something that needs to stop, because we are only asking for our protection so we can help your mother, we can help your father, and we can help the British public.
And what do you think? I mean, the British public there, last night we had the clap for our carers, once again, everybody coming out in support. But we also look at the scenes in the newspapers today where they're talking about the number of people that are out and about, the queues outside home warehouses, for example, the slight increase in transport use again. Do you fear there's a situation where people are getting fatigued by the lockdown situation and might flout the rules or think that it's OK to bend the rules here and there?
Well, firstly, I'd like to just thank the great British public for giving us this support. It's what really allows us to go in every morning and do our jobs. It's been a big factor in how we're working every day. But for those at home at the moment, I would say, if you stay at home, you can save lives. And if you stay at home, you can protect yourself, and then you can protect us as well. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's listened to the guidelines and who's listened to us when we do say, please stay at home for us. And this will all be over soon if we all work together.
I think Mino just had a message from someone on Twitter saying if my employer asked me to do a job without the correct PPE, this was somebody who works in fire and security, I'd absolutely have the right to say no, as do you as doctors. I just thought I'd come to Dr. Hillary on this as well, because Hillary, you know, as Mina was saying, there's pressure on the doctors and the nurses to keep stum, just to get on with the job and deal with what they're doing. Putting a head above the parapet like this comes with some ramifications, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And doctors and nurses and all healthcare professionals, paramedics as well, police have been saying for some time we don't have the PPE that we feel is adequate and is safe to use. And they're putting their lives, you know, they're exposing themselves to the virus, they're putting their lives on the line.